All right, let's jump into it. We've got a lot of content to cover. I've got a lot of great material to show you, so I'm excited about that. So let's jump in. So my name is Bill Down. This is the PMO life cycle, the PMO resource capability assessment process. And the question is, how do you assess your PMO employee capabilities? So I have 27 years of hands-on experience, been at Microsoft for 13 years, AT&T, government at British Columbia for 9 years. I've been an instructor at Bellevue College, locally in the Seattle area for many, many years. Done a number of presentations for PMI, Project Summit World. I'm heading to London this summer to speak at a conference there, a PMO conference there. I've been on the radio, and I'm a 4-time author of PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, and Shutting Down, Project Management Communication Tools, the Tactical Guide for Building a PMO, and back in 2008, Project Management Communication Bible, which was my first book. And so very, very excited to share the information. I've got tons and tons of experience in the PMO and project management space. So again, very, very excited to show you, share that. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're literally going to go over the 4-step process, right? There's 4 steps that I've documented and outlined in this whole PMO resource process. And then of course, we'll do a quick wrap up. And at that time, I'll also share where you can get the link and access to the book and that type of thing. So 4 steps, but again, jam-packed, just a ton of information. And so let's go. So one of the questions that comes up a lot, and I've managed a lot of PMOs, is around the PMO resource assessment, right? How do you know the employees have the skills to do the job? And so when you think about employees compared to contractors, or contractors or vendors, you tend to know the skill sets that you're hiring when you bring them in. But employees, you may not be as secure in really understanding their skill sets. So this whole process is around, how do you assess it? How do you assess the role? How do you assess the employees? So as a PMO manager, this will be an ongoing task, right? And something you're going to have to deal with and be in the position, in some cases, to make course corrections. If some of your employees don't have the skills they need, you may need to make some course corrections and get them the skills or move them from those positions. But before it comes to that, before you're moving people, what I've done is I've defined a process that will walk you through how do you get the right employees doing the right things for your PMO, right? And a lot of PMO managers struggle with this, right? They just don't know how to handle this situation, and so hopefully this 4-step process will help them. So here they are. The number 1, assess the PMO role for the skills required. Number 2, assess the PMO employees for the skills gaps based on the needs required for that role. Number 3, update the employee skills based on the gaps. And then number 4, verify and continue to work with those employees on the skill gap areas. That's it. It's pretty simple. It's a 4-step process, but you'd be surprised on how many PMO managers struggle with this and how many they just don't know how to do this. Right? And again, you won't be able to solve all the gaps immediately. It's going to take time. But unless you go through this process and unless you go through this process I'm about to take you through, you won't ever be able to solve this. And so again, let's dive into that process. So the PMO resource assessment process, this is step 1. And really, this is about understanding the skills required for the role. Okay? So before you start this process, I want you to consider the people, right? And the impact that the process could have on the people. So think about this. It could be very, very scary. They could be worried about their jobs, their careers, their mortgages. But think about what we're doing here. We're assessing their skills. We're saying, hey, Bob, hey, Mary, hey, Frank, you may not have the right skills to do the job that you're currently in. Or you may be applying on a job, but you don't have the right skill sets for that job, right? So you're highlighting where they need to improve, right? And so that can be very, very scary for them. My ultimate best advice is go in to this process with what's best in mind for your employees, right? You could easily highlight all the flaws and all the mistakes and all the issues, but you're their manager and you should be trying to bring the best out in them and trying to make them improve and help them improve. And so, yes, very quickly you can turn this into the worst things into a bad process, but you're their manager. And so you should be really trying to encourage them and giving them the skills that they need. I can't stress enough how important this is to care for your employees, right? Make sense? Again, I'm going to take all questions. You guys can chat along the way, but I can't take the chats right now. We'll get the chats at the end of the session. But it could really go terribly wrong if you don't really treat your employees with the best and with the best intentions throughout this process. So step one, what you want to do is you want to identify the needs of the position. So what do the skills and the technical, what do the skills and what skills are needed for the position? So determine the skills the role needs regardless of who's in the position at the time. Like we said, we could be making course corrections. Is this a technical role? Is it strategic? Is there a balance between the two? Does a role need technical skills like Power BI reporting and data modeling? And right, what are some of the things that you need to do right in this role? And I'm going to help you with that process. So what's the breakdown and the makeup of the role? So when I break down roles, and I've done this before, when I break down roles, I really break them down into 3 categories. I look at functional skills. So what are the functional skills required to do the role? How much is a role requires functional skills, technical skills, analytical skills? Then I look at business skills. What business skills are needed for this role? Do they need to have business knowledge, strategic thinking? Do they need to be P&L focused, budget focused, right? What are some of the business skills? And then finally, leadership skills, right? Communication skills, team building skills, direction setting, right? Really, when you think about the different types of PMO roles, they're really going to be broken down into these 3 types of buckets, right? Again, this is just a starting point. This is just where I've broken them down before. Your organization may be different. You may want to take a different slice at that. But if you're just starting out, I think this is a great way to kind of get things started, get things going, is breaking them down into these 3 buckets. And again, you may have other ideas and other things that you want to break them down, but believe strongly in just these 3. So here's what you do. You build yourself a PMO requirements capability assessment spreadsheet. Okay, across the top, you've got the various roles of the project. Down the side, you've got these 3 buckets, right? These role capabilities, functional, business, and leadership. And then you're going to add the specific skills to those particular areas. So for a functional, do they need technical, analytical, methodology background? And you design and you put as many rows in there as possible. Same with business acumen. What are the 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 things that you want them to have for business acumen? What about leadership? Then what you're going to do in the intersection cell is you're going to go and say, hey, for a PMO manager, do they need to have a lot of technical skills? Is that a small part of the role, a large part of the role, a medium part of the role? And basically what you do is you go fill this in this spreadsheet or this table. You fill this in for your specific area of the of your roles, for your various roles. So PMO manager, portfolio, program coordinators, whatever roles you have. You may have tools people, you may have process people, whatever your organization is built up, you create them a column and then you go through. You could go through it with the people that are in the roles. You could do it yourself, however you want to collect the data. But the intersection cell is really the key to this process, and you're filling that in. Okay, does that make sense? And so you really do have a great feeling for, is this a large part, a small part? What part of this do you have, does this role have to do? And so here's a blank spreadsheet, or again, table, spreadsheet, whatever you want to call it. You go through and you basically derive what skills you need. I strongly suggest that you go create the 3 role capabilities, so functional, business, and leadership. But I can't tell you all the various skills that you're going to add. You're going to have to do that for yourself and for your organization. Same with thing with your roles. PMO manager, portfolio, program, right? And you as a PMO manager or manager of PMOs, whatever the case may be, you may want to do that for the manager itself, but you may have 5 or 6 other columns that you're going to want to fill that in. Does that make sense? So then what you're doing here, right, is once you have that assessment done, is what you're doing is you're basically setting the foundation for how much these particular roles do these areas. So you've got that baseline, you've got that area, right? And remember, you can be liberal, right? Not every skill has to be large, right? You don't have to put large in every category. They have to do technical, they have to do business, they have to do communication. That's a large part of the role. That's a large part of the role. That's not going to be the case, okay? Again, don't be so liberal with that. Right? You can be, but I mean, again, let's be realistic. You're trying to find the right person that's got the right skill sets. The goal here is to understand the gap in the role requirements and eventually the employee doing the role. And there may not be a gap. That's the good thing, is you may have a gap in some cases and you may not have gaps. I think in a lot of cases you'll find you will have gaps, but again, you may or may not have any. Does that make sense? Do you guys like that? Yeah, again, let's take the questions at the end at the chatting, but I like it and I've used it before. I think it's solid. I think it's one that you're going to really stand behind and think that, hey, once you get this mapped out, you'll be able to build job descriptions. You'll be able to exactly see what kind of skill sets and capabilities you need to fill the particular roles of your PMO. So homework time, go back, go fill this in for your organization, right? Go fill this in, go fill in what you need for every particular role in your organization, fill in the right skills, fill in the right roles. You can add capabilities if you want. I'd strongly suggest you just leave the 3 for now and then build those 3 out as you continue to drive and really mature this process. Okay, so the bottom line right now is we actually have that process. So every PMO role will have a required set of skills associated to it, right? There's no question, and it'll be a large part of the role, a medium part of the role, or a small part of the role. But you're going to be able to make that assessment. Many PMO employees will need training to perform their roles, right? So this is what you're doing, is you're setting the foundation. You're saying, here are the skills, here are the capabilities, and you're also kind of outlining what training will be required as well, because there's going to be a big component of training in some cases. And then, of course, mapping the skills required for each role to the employee performing the role will allow you to create an effective training plan for every employee. But again, as PMO manager or as a functional manager for the organization, and again, this doesn't necessarily have to be for PMOs, it could be for anything, but you're going to want that skill set and that capability list and the amount that's going to be part of that role. You're going to want that for your organization at the particular role level, and it really doesn't matter who's in the role at this point. Okay, make sense? Good, and again, we'll address questions at the end. Okay, step 2 in the process. Now we've got the foundation, right? So now we know exactly what is needed for each role. Let's start looking at the employees. So working with the employee to determine their skill sets, right? You want to measure the employee, and you want to measure them under the same 3 guidelines: functional, business, and leadership. Now, if you change the guidelines in step 1, then of course you got to change the guidelines in step 2. I'm just strongly suggesting you use the same guidelines. And again, what's the purpose and why are we doing this? We're documenting the gap between the role requirements and what the employee's current skill sets are. You want to ensure you understand the gap, the employees understand the gaps, they're committed to the gaps, right? Because if an employee is not committed to it, they won't really step up and start learning, right? If they don't think they have a gap or a skill set problem, they're not going to spend the time to do that. So the focus is understanding where you need to step back and really help train the employee to be able to, so they can effectively do their job. Warning, right? You have to approach this step very carefully. I mentioned it before, and I'm mentioning it again. Anytime an employee is feeling exposed, feeling vulnerable, right? As a manager, you have to be sensitive to that. This is still a required step, right? This is still business. You need the right person in the right role, right? And so you have to understand the personal side of it. But as a manager, and especially as a PMO manager, you have to understand you need the right person doing with the right skills doing that job. But there's a personal element to that. And I say address that very, very carefully. The goal is this process of ensuring your PMO employees have the skills they need to perform their jobs, right? But ultimately, as PMO manager, you are responsible for the work and you are assigning people to their respective roles. But you own that, right? Now, there is a small flip side to this that I want to just put out there and just let that sit with you. What if you have an employee that's a huge problem? Never gets his or her work done, always late, huge HR problem. Well, this process can help course correct as well, right? Maybe this employee is struggling because they don't have the skill sets to do the job. If you assess the employee's skills, assess the role needs, maybe there's a mismatch there, and you can use this as a course correction opportunity as well. Again, can't stress enough how important this is to take care of your employees that you want, that you want to stay around for a while and that you value, right? Can't stress enough how important that is, but there is another side to it that you could also use as well. And I'll just leave that at that. Okay, so here's another spreadsheet, the PMO Employee Capability Assessment Form. You've got the name, you've got the roles, you've got the technical skills, you've got all the skills that you've taken from the last spreadsheet and you've put them into here. And now what you're going to do is you're going to do a scoring matrix, right? You're going to determine the scoring for each employee. So William is 5 at technical skills, 3 at analytical, 2 at methodology, and so on and so on. And so you fill this in for every employee. Right? And so you really get that documented and you work with them and you fill this in. And so you've got a great mapping here. Now, what clearly is the first thing that people are going to challenge? Well, they're going to challenge the scoring matrix. I get that, right? And they have challenged those scoring matrices before. But you have to start with someplace. You have to start somewhere. And so what I've done is I've said, here's your 1 to 5 list. Here's your expert to no knowledge. Let's just use hands-on experience. Hands-on experience and years of hands-on experience tends to feel very good. If you're 15 plus years hands-on doing something, you're probably an expert. Right now, this is a plus or minus, and you can adjust this, but I'm just giving you the initial take here. Knowledgeable 10 plus, experience 5 to 10, limited 2 plus, knowledge 0, no knowledge 0 experience. So again, right? If you can adjust these dates or these years, but you have to start someplace. And so I would start with this scoring matrix and just understand that it's going to be challenged. Now, I would also bring the scoring matrix to my PMO team meeting, be very, very transparent in this process, and get that general consensus of where everyone's at. But if you can't get that general consensus, I would go with this because this feels right. Now, could you say 20 plus years or knowledgeable 15 plus years? Could you adjust the years? Of course you could. I just wanted to give you a starting point and really that place where you can adjust for yourself, because this will be the one area that's challenged. Again, you've got homework, right? Go back, right? Fill this in. Go have the discussion on the scoring matrix. Go back, fill this in for every employee, work with them, map this, right? And make sure that they feel great, right? Hey, they don't have the business knowledge. Well, what can you do to get to raise their number from no knowledge, right, all the way up to right, all the way up to a 3 or a 4 or a 5, right? And again, a lot of that's going to be years in role. So how do you move that bar, right? So go fill this in for each employee and really make sure that they're comfortable with that number. And again, it doesn't have to be all 5s. You just have to really use that scoring matrix as your basics, but it's a starting point anyway. Right. But again, it's an emotional time. You have to be careful on how you approach this topic. Employees will often jump to conclusions that you're not expecting. They're thinking that you're going to use this to lay off. You're thinking they're going to use this to fire them. You have to go in with the best intentions in mind, and you've got to be as open as possible that you want to do this. Now, when you're building a PMO, this is not the time to do it. But as you work into the execution and the running of the PMO, this is a great time to do this and make sure your course correction and make sure you've got the right people. One of the ways to approach this, and really soft and gentle way of approaching this, is through the concept of group training. Right? And so, hey, you guys, everyone needs to learn MS Project. Well, let's do group training and let's get everyone brought up. Right? And so when you do a group training, you're not centering out Mary or Frank or Joseph. You're not saying, hey, you're really bad at project, we're going to get you trained up. You're going to go, hey, let's get everyone trained together. And that softens that whole process. So really think about group training, how important that can be. The last thing is very specifically generate a training plan for each employee, right? So if you've got a lot of 2s, you got a lot of 1s, maybe some 3s there, that generates a training plan. And that's one where you can actually go through and say, here's what we need you to work on, right? And so it's really, really a great way. You've got the role, now you've got the employees, and you understand the gaps between those, and then you can create that training plan. So step 3 in the process is really around updating the skills based on the gaps, right? So step 3 is you've got the roles, you understand large, medium, small, right? And if it's a large part of the role and someone's a 2 or a 1, that's probably a huge problem. And so this really highlights that gap, okay? So when you're considering the skills you have to update, there's a number of decisions that you're going to want to think about. The long-term value and the career roadmap of that employee. Are they an HR nightmare? Are they, and we'll look at that. Budget available, timing, other factors, right? So there are things that you're going to want to consider when you think about how much energy, how much time, how much money do you want to invest in an employee. So long-term value. So what do we mean by, right? What's that current plan for the employee? Are they on a fast track to management or directorship or GM or whatever the case may be? Is he or she someone you're willing to invest in, right? Are they a top performer? Do they have performance issues and you want them to go away? They're HR nightmares, right? So what is that long-term in that career roadmap for each employee? You need to have that. That's so important. How much budget's available for training, right? Does the company provide employee budget? Do you have a PMO budget that you could do training? Do you have funding to send multiple people, or can you only send a certain amount of people a year? Have you talked to your management? Do you have their buy-in on that you want to increase the skills of their employees? So these are all PMO and functional manager conversations that you're going to want to have and really drive through. But how much budget is available? And training costs. There's often not a lot of free training out there. And so it costs. So training budgets play a big role. When can the training occur, right? Is this online training? Is this is this where they have to go into a classroom? What's preventing the employees from taking any training, right? Are they working around the clock and there's no way they can get training factored in? What other factors are there, right? So these are some of the things that as PMO manager and functional manager that you have to factor in when you're thinking about updating the employees and the specific skill gaps for those employees. Make sense? Yeah. So best practices, let's go back just this, when you think about it, right? Earlier, we completed a spreadsheet that each employee, right, across this 5-to-1, right? So we said, hey, there's some 5s, there's some 4s, right? And we created that table and we basically said, this is where you're at. Now, what's important is you have to pick and choose. All this training and all this learning and understanding, it takes time. You can't say for all the 1s, maybe they got 3 or 4 or 5 1s, you can't say we need to get all these 1s up to a 3 overnight or in the next week or next month. You have to pick and choose, right? So first of all, the employees have to agree that they're at that particular level and they need to want to learn to get up to the next level. But you as their manager, as a PMO manager, you also can't drill down and you can't spend a ton of time and focus because all they'll be doing is training. And so you have to balance that. So pick maybe 2, 3 at the very most that you'll then go and you'll say, hey, let's get training going on that, or maybe just 2. Again, every employee is going to be different, but it's really, really important that you do that. Right? Just pick a couple of those things. So you're going to use this spreadsheet, right? You're going to say, hey, this is a large part of your role and you know nothing about methodology, or this is business knowledge is a huge part of your role. How do we get you trained in the business, right? So go back to the role requirement matrix, right? And really understand what the role. Go back to the employee, right? And then use the 2 of them to work that training plan, right? I've got small technical skills, but we've got, we've got large, or whatever the case may be, right? You need to look at the employees, look at their lows. And what I would do is I'd focus on 2, 3, and 4, right? Or 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, or 1 and 2. If they're a large or a medium part of a role, I would then jump in and make sure that there's some sort of training plan. Right? So business knowledge for the portfolio manager is at a 1. And if you go to portfolio manager, business knowledge is large. So why is there that gap? And what can you do about that gap? Right? And so you literally go, in this particular case, they're just new to the organization, but there's training, there's decks, there's stuff they can learn to learn that business knowledge. But when you use these 2 tools together, it becomes an amazing mapping tool, right? It becomes an amazing way to really understand the gaps and understand the specific training and the needs for the individuals. And they're a great set of tools together, right? These are the 2 tools that you want to use to get that full picture. So use both the role requirements and the employee skill gap. But look for values, right? 3, 2, 1. These are the gaps to skill on, to really focus on. But again, no more than 1 or 2, right? More than 2 courses would be overwhelming. It'd be less effective. They're going to be stressed out. They're got to do their job now. They got to do all this additional training. But again, as PMO manager or as functional manager, it's your job to understand, and it's your job to make sure you've got the right people in the role. So you're going to want to put some stuff in place. Make that part of their training plan, make that part of their commitments. Put maybe some bonus dollars around it, but you're going to want to make sure they get their skill sets up where appropriate. Make sense? Yeah. Now, where do we find training, right? So there's training all over the place. There's internal company training. There's local area training, like in the Seattle area. You can go to multiple places to do training. But online is full of plural sites, Udemy, Lynda, PMI. I've got training sessions, right? I've got training programs. But again, there's tons and tons of online training that's available. And for this portfolio PMO project manager role, some of this online training will work out just fine. but local colleges, local training, tons and tons of training. Again, focus on 3, 2, and 1 in the skill gaps, because that's going to be the right level based on what the role requires. If you've got a little to no knowledge and it requires a small amount, then maybe that's fine. If you're a PMO manager and you don't need to have a ton of technical skills and you don't have a ton of technical skills, that's fine. But with using those 2 spreadsheets or tables, you're able to do that mapping very, very nicely. And again, that applies for portfolio, program, project, whatever role you have, you want to do that. But training all over the place, very easy to find. But again, focus on 3, 2, and 1. So every PMO employee's training is a critical part of running the PMO, right? You have to get your folks trained. Employee training needs and a method to continue up to, right? They have to continually update their skill sets. Hey, we're using Power BI now. We're using this tool. We're using Project Online, BSD, whatever the case may be. You've got to constantly be updating and training your employees, right? Not all training has to be done in person, right? It doesn't. There is some really, really valuable training that can be done online through YouTube videos, through Udemy, through whatever the online courses. There's some great stuff out there. It doesn't have to be done in person. And so they've got to make the time to be able to do it. But let's be clear, they don't have to do them all in person. Some people prefer that. Some people don't. Just don't ignore all the goodness that they have online and all the good classes on there. And then utilize the company's training budget. A lot of PMO managers don't talk about this, and a lot of PMO managers really skip this. If you've got budget and you've got budget allocated for training, and a lot of companies do give training for each of their employees, right? You're going to want to utilize that. And you want to tap in that, right? And so that's one thing that you want to keep an eye on, and you want to keep talking with your management throughout that process. Okay, step 4 in the process. We're tracking nicely. We've got the gaps, we've got the skills, we can find training. Now it's a matter of verifying and continue to work with the employee on those skill gap areas, right? This is an ongoing process. You need to verify the training's working. You need to verify the skills are going up, right? And this is a process that you're going to want to continue to keep going. It's not a one and done process, right? It's not something you're just going to do once and never do again. It's going to be one that you continually ongoing do. I wouldn't skill gap them more than once a year though, right? I'd maybe make that part of the yearly review, just figure out where they are from a skill gap. If the skill gaps are huge, you'll see that in day-to-day execution, and you can make that course correction. But we live in a fast-paced world where things are changing and technology is changing on a regular basis. So you want to keep your employees current. You, as their PMO manager, as their functional manager, it's your responsibility to train your employees. So stay on top of the budget, stay on top of training, stay on top of that overall employee improvement process. Right? Can't stress enough. It's really, really important that you as a PMO manager or a functional manager, you do that ongoing training and making sure you're keeping your employees current. Now, roles change all the time, right? And some employees take to certain skills over another. I'm very, very technical, so I'm going to jump in and really love that tools and technology. Others are not like that. So the role changes. Some employees like technical, some don't. Some are more strategic. Watch that. Learn. Talk to them. Listen. Understand where their passions are. If an employee is passionate about something, they're going to be way, way more excited to take training on that, right? And so watch for that. Like I said, do this yearly. Look for changes and improvements in their scores. If scores don't improve, and they're critical to the role, you may need to move that employee, right? Get them out of that role, move them to a different role, give them some additional training, give them some mentoring. But again, this isn't your job. Your job is to make sure the right people are in the right role, doing the skills that they need to execute the functions of the PMO, right? So it's an important part of your role, and it's an important part that you keep that process going, right? So continue to look at the roles and the skills required, right? You may have a portfolio manager that has that's not very technical, but you just dumped a really technical portfolio system on them. Maybe it's overwhelming. They can't do the job, right? Again, this process is always going to change. This is something that you keep going, you keep updating. This is really your responsibility because you own the roles and you own the skills and the capabilities, right? And then it's just a matter of how that matches to the employees and the skill gaps that they're doing, that they have, and that they're in their role. So this will be updated on a regular basis, and then yearly you'll update that skill gap, and then you'll look for that connection and those gaps between those two. Again, yearly best practice is do this yearly. More often than that, the employees just don't have the time to increase their knowledge. Unless they're super, super passionate about it, they're just not going to do it. If it's more than a year, it quickly gets forgotten, right? So if you do, hey, let's do this every 3 years, every 5 years, it's deemed not important. It's deemed not that valuable, and employees will just forget about it with all the things they have on their plate. So a year feels about right. A year feels like that's the thing where, too often, more than that, like every 6 months, it will be too much. But again, you've got to get the right temperature for your organization, and you've got to figure out what works, but don't go more than a year. Okay? And really, it is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process that must continue to be a top priority for both the employee and the PMO manager. And as employees complete the training, look for their work deliverables and opportunities, right? Have brown bags and say, hey, we just did all this training on Power BI. Let's show everyone the new skills, the new dashboards, the new reports, right? And it's a budget ask. As a PMO manager, you're going to need budget. And that's something you got to work with your manager. You got to work with management. You got to say, hey, we need the skills for this PMO, and therefore we need budget, and we need to train some of our employees. PMOs often have tools. There's often tool training that's required, business acumen training. There's a ton of different trainings that are required, but it's an ongoing budget ask that you work with your management. Make sense? Excellent. Again, I'll get questions as we finish up. So as we summarize, right, we wrap up our capability assessment. We covered really 4 steps to ensure that your PMOs employees are set up to be successful, right? We can no longer get away with not training our employees and continue to run a successful PMO. We got to have skilled people doing these jobs, right? Fast-paced world, right? Technology trends and technologies change all the time. So that's good, that's fine, but we need to stay on top of that. And PMO resources are really our greatest assets, right? So treat them that way, and you'll watch your PMO grow to an incredible organization, but you have to treat them that way. Like I said, this all comes out of my book, The PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, and Shutting Down. This is chapter 19 specifically. My name is Bill Dow. Here are my 3 books that are up on Amazon today. You can get me on Facebook. You can get me on Dow Publishing, Bill Dow, Dow Publishing LLC. Get me on LinkedIn. And I want to thank you all for your time today.